get started. And I apologize for sitting, but like I said, I have the speaking notes here, and I really want to make sure that I bring everything in, so that's why I do this. I will have, we'll go through the agenda. You'll see how kind of things are going to be laid out. But welcome, and thank you for being here. The title of this presentation, Housing First, Equity Always, isn't just a theme, it's the through line of today's talk. We'll look at homelessness not as individual failure, but as the product of interacting systems. Housing markets, wages, health, justice, and policy. Data reveals patterns. Systems thinking explains why they repeat. My goal is to connect empathy with evidence so we can design what works in practice. By the end, you'll see why Housing First isn't just compassionate, it's structurally sound. It reduces churn, improves outcomes, and aligns with how real systems behave. If we learn to see flow, feedback, and leverage, we can stop arguing over snapshots and start changing the system that produces them. So here's the roadmap for today. I'll start with how I came into this work, then introduce systems thinking and how it reshapes what we notice and measure. We'll connect those ideas to Housing First, review the evidence and what it shows, and then move into system flow, stock, inflow, outflow, and the feedback loops that drive change. Finally, we'll end up with concrete steps your community can start tomorrow. The goal is to move from good intentions to good design, using data as a feedback instrument, not a scorecard. So our efforts compound instead of recycle. Homelessness is complex. Housing is complex. And stories alone can't explain why it persists. Data shows patterns. Systems thinking shows why those patterns repeat. It reveals the flows in and out of homelessness and where our interventions help or harm. When we combine Housing First with a system lens, it stops being philosophy and becomes a design principle. Stabilize first, then support. That simple shift turns chaos into a system we can manage. This isn't about blame. It's about understanding pressure, rhythm, and leverage so we intervene where change lasts. So this section frames who I am and why I care. Because systems work is both technical and human, my background is in radio operations. I had 7 stations across 3 states, which taught me flow, dependencies, and what happens when one link breaks. I later studied information systems, business, and data management, which gave me tools to turn complexity into clarity. Today, I help communities visualize their homelessness systems clearly enough to change them. It's the same operational rigor required to run a network of stations, applied to a network of programs. If we can see the system together, we can align it together. That's me. I spent 20 years managing radio stations where I learned how systems fail when one link breaks, like I was saying. Later, data and business training gave me the tools to turn complexity into clarity. Now I apply that same operational discipline to homelessness and housing systems. The lesson is universal. When we can see the system together, we can align it together. Different industry, same principle. Flow, coordination, design. Moved out of radio, and I started as a data analyst. I became a chief technology officer, actually at a COC, an HMIS lead, and now I build dashboards for over 60 communities nationwide. The work is personal. My son is currently experiencing homelessness in LA. And I actually went out to LA in February for a conference, honestly just to try to find my son, who I hadn't seen in 2 years, and I was able to connect with him. And we're working on reunification, but as we all know, stuff is difficult, and it's especially difficult with distance. I'm in Southwest Florida, and he's in California. It makes it difficult, but we're working on it. But it reminds me that accuracy isn't just statistical, it's moral. Systems must learn and stop repeating failures because we're dealing with real people and real lives. So in those early years as a data analyst for the Charlotte County Homeless Coalition in Port Charlotte, Florida, I wore a lot of hats and I learned from great people doing the work. As a data analyst and later CTO of the local COC and HMIS lead, as I mentioned, I managed HMIS operations, that's Homeless Management Information System, if you're unfamiliar. I ran the point in time count, I produced all local, state, and federal reports. I supported veteran and chronic homelessness case conferencing teams, and we actually declared functional zero in my community for veterans and chronically homeless, and I was able to learn a lot doing those case conferencing by name list meetings. Great way to work on the system. I also handled the unglamorous essentials, IT support, network and security, website and graphic design, because getting the data right and communicating it well is part of client care. That breadth matters. While overwhelming at times, it grounded me in the day-to-day realities that behind the numbers and taught me how systems truly function in the field. Our homeless coalition was, we had a soup kitchen cafe, we had emergency shelter, transitional housing, rapid rehousing. It was kind of a one-stop shop. So it was great because I got to learn a lot of things. You know, I'd be working on a spreadsheet and all of a sudden I'm unloading a truck of free bread. You know, you never knew what the day might bring, but you learned a lot because you were right there doing the work. We had some street outreach on site, but they were a whopping 300 yards away down the street. So we had street outreach right there too. So I got to really kind of learn the system very well. Later, I actually had the privilege of serving on the board of that same organization. And that taught me a simple truth. Systems don't change in silos. Progress happens when data teams, providers, agencies, and policymakers, when everybody sees the same picture. That alignment is what turns good programs into good systems. For decades, our system was built on rules, curfews, sobriety, compliance milestones. The idea was that people had to prove readiness for housing, but the cracks showed fast. You could follow every rule and still fall through. Data told a different story. Communities that housed first, then offered voluntary services, achieved better outcomes at lower cost. Housing first marked a turning point from enforcing steps to creating stability, from deciding who's deserving to designing systems that work. So this was the old model, the stairway to success. The logic was simple. Climb the steps, get sober, find work, complete treatment, and earn housing. Each step came with conditions, sobriety, curfews, mandatory check-ins, employment rules. But look closely. Each is another place to fall off. For people already struggling with trauma or poverty, this was not a path upward. It was an obstacle course that rewarded luck, not readiness. I'm not sure about your community. You may have decent transportation, but a lot of times transportation is an issue in a lot of communities I work with. And it's not easy to wake up in the woods and to find a way to get to a job interview, or even to your case manager's appointment, or to whatever thing you have going on. Everything is infinitely harder, and we don't always consider that. It's not just hey, let's wake up and go to that appointment. It's so easy. It is when you have transportation and a bank account and a comfy bed and a hot shower. There's a lot of things that we take for granted. The old system failed because it was built on the wrong assumptions. I hate assumptions. It assumed homelessness was about bad choices, that if people just followed the steps, they'd reach stability. But people entering these programs were already carrying enormous pressure, trauma, poverty, mental illness, addiction. The system added more on top. Those cracks in the staircase, that's where people fell through. Not because they didn't try, but because the structure itself was unstable. It wasn't a staircase to success. It was a stress test that almost no one could pass. Instead of climbing stairs on a staircase full of rules, what if we just jumped over it? What if stability, a safe, secure place to live, came first? That's housing first. Not housing only. I think that's important to say. It's not housing only. Instead of making people prove readiness for housing, we give them housing first and surround them with the support they need to stay there. It replaces judgment with evidence and obstacles with opportunity. It's not about skipping accountability. It's about reordering the approach so people can rebuild, not climb. Housing first provides a foundation for recovery instead of a staircase to nowhere. Something else I would like to point out in the slides, if I have any kind of statistics, pictures, anything of that, the attributions and studies, anything like that, the links will be in the slide notes. So for example, this slide specifically, I have 4 different websites to kind of back up these numbers. So if you're ever asking yourself, where did he get this from? I may not agree with it. Well, you can go to the source and argue with them. Housing first has been proven for over 20 years. HUD studies show 85 to 90% housing retention rates. In Sam Simbaris's Pathways to Housing study, nearly 9 out of 10 people were still housed 5 years later. Health outcomes improved. Emergency room visits and jail stays dropped by half. Financially, communities saved $9,000 to $30,000 per person each year. Housing first isn't just compassionate, it's evidence-based design that improves lives, reduces costs, and strengthens systems. Stability first doesn't just work, it changes everything. Housing first is a simple idea with profound results. It says that housing isn't something you earn, it's where recovery begins. It removes preconditions, again, like sobriety, employment, or treatment completion, and replaces them with respect and support to be able to do these things. People are offered housing right away, along with voluntary services to help them rebuild. Like I said, it's not housing only, it's a housing as a foundation, no more stairs. And the data backs it up. When people have a safe place to live first, everything else, treatment, employment, recovery, becomes more achievable. Housing doesn't just end homelessness, it creates the conditions where positive, permanent change is finally possible. This is Dawn Wade. She lives in one of Maine's housing first communities. When asked about her home, she said, "This is home to me. It's a community here. I don't know where I'd be without it." That's the real outcome. Not just retention rates or cost savings, but stability, belonging, and dignity. When people move from surviving to living, everything changes. Health, relationships, hope. Each data point we see represents someone like Dawn, who just needed the system to give them a fair start and a foundation to rebuild. So I figure a lot of people may know what Housing First is, so that's why I went through it, pulled it up quickly, but I didn't want to kind of rehash what many people already know. This is where I think some of the change, shifting in the way we think is going to really, I think, hopefully impact you more. At least I think it's something that I think takes us a little bit farther. So now that we've seen how Housing First changes outcomes, let's zoom out even further. Up to this point, we focused on programs and results. Now we'll look at how systems behave. Systems thinking is like putting on new glasses. It helps us see homelessness not as isolated people or projects, but as a movement. People flowing in and out due to pressures, barriers, and supports. Once you see that flow, you can't unsee it. The numbers we track aren't just counts, they're signals of how the system is performing. Systems thinking teaches us to see relationships instead of parts, and change over time instead of snapshots. When we only look at static numbers, like the point in time count, we're seeing a single frame of a movie. It tells us how many people are homeless, but not why or how that number shifts. Systems thinking lets us step back and watch the whole film to see causes, pressures, and feedback loops. Once we start seeing those patterns, we can design smarter, lasting solutions instead of reacting to the moment. How we frame a problem determines how we solve it. A mental model relies on assumptions and quick judgments, useful for small issues, dangerous for complex ones. Mental model might say move your hand away from a hot pot. That's a good idea. But there's some other things in the mix when you look at more complex things than just a simple yes, no, or A, B. In homelessness, that model says that the mental model says it lies with individuals. They're the problem. Let me think about this. I got a job. I have a car. Seems easy. I don't know why they're doing that. Mental model, flawed. Again, they need to work harder, get sober, follow rules. That's a mental model. A system model zooms out to show relationships and feedback loops, the forces shaping the outcomes. When we shift from what's wrong with this person to what's wrong with the system producing this result, everything about our response changes. So, let's look at how mental models fail. Big one's traffic. Everybody thinks just widen that road, make it 10 times bigger. We know that's wrong. It doesn't work. More people just drive on it. You add more lanes to reduce congestion, it actually just gets worse. It's counterintuitive. The mental model says one thing that's wrong, the actual model says increase your number of actual routes. It's a simple solution, but it works. You don't just make the lane bigger. What about forest fires? Well, we should stop them all. Again, like the hot pot, you see a fire, put it out. Okay, well that builds fuel, lots of dry fuel. So if you don't actually burn some of it or let some of it happen in the way it should, you get mega fires. It's counterintuitive. Antibiotics, over-prescribe, and we create resistance. The logic feels right, but fails over time because it ignores the system's behavior. Homelessness and housing works the same way. When we only focus on the individuals, we miss the feedback loops driving the problem and end up reinforcing the very cycle we're trying to fix. When most people think about homelessness, the mental model kicks in. Bad choices, addiction, laziness. It feels simple and personal, but it's wrong. That thinking shapes policy too. If we believe homelessness is caused by individual failure, we design systems that punish or fix people instead of addressing the conditions that produced the outcome. The truth is, homelessness and housing stems from system pressures, rents, wages, health, justice, and bias, not from personal flaws. Until we shift that lens, we'll keep treating symptoms instead of causes. Here's how mental models play out. Bob sees a pillar blocking his way and decides to push it over to make more space. From his view, it seems simple, direct solution, it feels right. But mental models do that. They create confidence without clarity. They make us act quickly before we understand the system we're part of. Homelessness works the same way. We make decisions that seem helpful, but ripple outward in ways we can't unsee, or we can't see. We'll come back to Bob in a minute. Oh, all of a sudden, Bob's choice doesn't seem so good. So now let's zoom out and see what really happened to Bob. The pillar wasn't standing alone, it was part of a connected system. Pushing one part caused ripple effects that circled right back to him. The action that felt like progress actually made things worse. That's the power of systems thinking. It helps us see how one small move can create large, unintended outcomes. In homelessness, the same thing happens. When programs make isolated decisions without seeing how they interact with the rest of the system. Let's bring that idea specifically to homelessness. Imagine our community's point in time count finds 50 people experiencing homelessness. I know it's a low number, it's just imaginary. That number feels solid, 50. It's even such a small number. But it's just a snapshot, one frame of that movie I was talking about. It tells us who is homeless tonight, not how they got there, how long they've been there, or who found housing afterward. In system terms, that's the stock. It's called stock. Like taking a photo of a river and calling it a lake. To understand the story, we have to see the movement underneath, the inflow and outflow that shapes numbers over time. So we start with 50 people in our count. Over the next year, our community does everything right. We house all 50 people, every person. On paper, that's success. 0 left on the list. This represents outflow, the movement of people out of homelessness and into housing. But systems thinking asks us to pause before celebrating. What happens when we look again next year? That's where the real insight begins. Because without addressing inflow, the count may look exactly the same. So a year later, the count shows 50 people again. Wait a minute. Did we fail? We house 50 people. How are there 50 more? What's going on? The public asks, why aren't the numbers going down? But it's not the same 50 people. The answer is inflow. If people are entering homelessness as fast as others are leaving, the total stays flat. If inflow grows while funding doesn't, the number rises. It's not failure, it's system pressure. The mental model says the system, or says the homeless system failed. But the system model reveals what's really happening. It points to where we can intervene upstream. I think this applies well for healthcare, because let's imagine an emergency room. No one expects an emergency room to be empty. That would be very odd. I mean, I've been in an emergency room a few times. It's never been empty. That'd be great, nice and fast. We know new patients will always be coming into the ER. So we judge the ER by how well it responds, not whether it's vacant or empty. But with homelessness, we expect 0. Even as rents rise, wages lag, and people are discharged with nowhere to go. That's like expecting an empty ER during flu season. The real question isn't why isn't it 0, it's what are we doing to stop the pressures filling it? That's what systems thinking teaches us to ask. Most people imagine homelessness as a static number. 50 this year, 50 next. The mental model says, the system must not be working, but that view is misleading. It traps us into blaming individuals or the homeless response system itself, instead of asking what pressure keep this number constant. Like Bob and the Pillar, we focus on what's visible and feel certain we understand it. But when leaders design solutions around that illusion, like adding shelters or tightening eligibility in a way that's not understanding the system, they miss the flows that actually drive the problem. I mean, if you're just constantly building more shelters because you have more homeless people, I mean, that's an immediate response, but why are more people coming in? Why is the number going up? That's what we really need to look at. So, now zoom out again. It's still the same 50 people in that stock, but this time we add inflow, and the story changes completely. The question isn't whether the number goes up or down, it's whether inflow is being managed. Picture water pouring into a bathtub. If you only watch the water level, you miss the faucet. Systems thinking shifts our attention to that faucet, the upstream pressures pushing people into homelessness. And I had a kid one time had the water in the bathtub go over. You know, of course I undid the drain, but do you think I let the faucet keep running? And the water was overflowing? No, I did both. I made sure to do the drain and I turned the water off. You don't turn the water off, well, how do you expect the thing to empty faster? You know, it doesn't make any sense. So again, if we only focus on the drain on exits, while the tap keeps gushing, the tub will always overflow. So to truly solve homelessness, we can't just drain faster, we have to turn down the water. Here are some examples of inflow also known as system pressures that you may or may not have discussed. Rising rents, wage stagnation, predatory lending, evictions, domestic violence, foster care exits, hospital discharges without housing plans, incarceration reentry, addiction marketing, gambling expansion, climate disasters, systemic racism. These aren't abstract, they're real forces pressing down daily. And unless these pressures ease, the faucet stays open. We have to stop asking, why are individuals failing, and start asking, why is the system producing homelessness? The answer tells us where real prevention begins. I've been doing some research just on the side, and it's amazing some of the companies, alcohol companies and cigarette companies that specifically target, they actually have marketing campaigns for homeless people to get them even more addicted because they're a constant source of revenue if you can get them addicted enough. And that's twisted and sick. When we can stop that kind of stuff, that's going to ease the pressure a little bit, you know. So it's very interesting. Lotteries, a lot of things that seem like they might go towards education or whatever, but you're hurting people to help a few. There's a lot of ways upstream, but a lot of those are policy decisions, and that's tough because sometimes you have to have money to talk to people that make policy, or you got to bug them, you got to write letters. But the policies are where we're seeing a lot of the pressures come in, and failure to protect people. So ask the public, why are people homeless? And you'll hear words like lazy, addict, criminal. That's the mental model at work, pushing responsibility onto individuals and leading to punishment. Ordinances, arrests, bans. But when we study the system, we see something else. Lack of housing, low wages, fragile safety nets. Where we assign responsibility determines the solutions we create. Blame the person, and you get punishment. Blame the system, and you get prevention, investment, and stability. Narrative isn't side work, it's strategy. I don't know about how you have everything set up here, but in Florida, we actually, we pay lobbyists and for homelessness and for housing, and they go and they do a lot of work at the state level. It's important to do because we have a lot of legislation, especially in Florida, that's not good for people. Camping bans and sleeping bans are not a great way of protecting citizens. So now let's connect it all. Stock, inflow, and outflow. Inflow pushes people in. Outflow, which are housing placements, vouchers, services, move people out. When we see both, the picture makes sense. The point in time count stops being mysterious. Housing first fits perfectly here. It speeds up outflow by stabilizing people and reduces churn from returns. That stability also frees capacity to address inflow. The question isn't how many people are homeless tonight, but what's happening with inflow and outflow. Once we understand that balance, we can manage homelessness as a system, not a snapshot. Thinking of the bathtub again, outflow is the drain we control. These are our exits: permanent supportive housing, rapid rehousing, affordable units, family reunification, healthcare access, employment, rental assistance, diversion, community supports, and veterans programs. When these are coordinated and funded, the water level drops. When fragmented or under-resourced, it rises. If we want to change the stock, we have to expand these exits deliberately and measure them in real time. Housing first keeps that drain open and flow. So here's where the lens becomes a blueprint. Stock data like the pit count gives us one night's picture: who is homeless, not why. Add inflow and outflow, and the story deepens. Inflow shows pressures, like we said, rent and wages. Outflow shows exits and cracks in the system. Together, they reveal how homelessness behaves. Instead of try harder, systems thinking asks, where do we push? Do we slow the faucet, widen the drain, or seal the leaks? Seeing those dynamics turns debate into design. This diagram looks messy because real life is messy. but it maps feedback loops, how housing, health, work, policing, and stigma amplify or ease homelessness. Some loops spiral outward, others down. Rising rents can cause evictions and worsen health, which makes employment harder. But supportive housing can reverse the loop. Stability leads to income. Income reduces returns. The key is we can't hold all this in our heads. Modeling reveals where small, well-placed moves can create big, lasting change. And every community is going to be different, every state. Now this visual shows where leverage lives. At the bottom are weak levers, metrics, materials, short-term tweaks. They're visible, but rarely transformative. Higher up are harder, more powerful levers, shifting resources, rewriting rules, creating new feedback loops. At the very top are cultural levers, changing beliefs, goals and purpose, or mental models. Once we shift how people think about homelessness, everything downstream changes. The real question isn't what can we fix, it's are we aiming high enough to change the system itself? When we blame individuals for homelessness, we set ourselves up to fail. It ignores the bigger forces at play. Focusing only on the stock, the count, just recycles people and leaders through the system. Honestly, I can't tell you how many people I've seen in this work go on to other things because it's just such difficult work. It's disappointing to see such really smart, talented individuals leave this work because it's just, the pressure and what's expected and the lack of funding. It's too bad. But communities look like they're failing even as they house people daily. The true causes are upstream. Rent evictions, discharges, wages that don't keep up, like I said. Where we assign responsibility, though, determines what strategies we choose. Blame people and we punish. Recognize pressures and we design solutions that work. So this is what we have currently taking place in the country. We're working on it down in Florida. Unfortunately, it's kind of sad. But when we blame individuals or a COC, continuum of care itself, we miss context. COC leaders are often fighting huge inflow pressures driven by bad policy. Across the country, criminalization laws are rising. No sleeping bans, arrests, curfews. These don't reduce homelessness. They worsen it, pushing people deeper into instability and into profit-driven systems. Meanwhile, groups opposing Housing First exploit blame for political gain. This isn't citicism. And I'm not talking about political parties. I'm talking about businesses that are using the system to profit, especially the criminal justice system. Even failed systems generate profit, and that makes change harder, but not impossible. You have to be aware first before you know where to push and to press. Now, Housing First is the counter model. It's not housing only, it's housing first, then support. That order matters. Without housing, health, work, and recovery wobble. With it, they stabilize and grow. Housing First widens outflow, reduces returns, and lowers cost. If homelessness is a bathtub filling faster than it drains, Housing First is the tool that clears the drain and seals the leaks. Punishment increases churn. Housing First creates stability. One keeps the cycle alive, the other breaks it. So Housing First is just a program. It stabilizes the entire system. Removing preconditions smooths outflows and reduces people cycling back into homelessness. Scaled up, it frees capacity and lowers pressures. Paired with prevention and diversion, it balances both sides of the equation. Fewer people pushed in, more people exiting successfully. It's not the end of a process, but the anchor of a system design, turning compassion into structure and stability into measurable results. So framing changes everything. When we blame individuals, we get punishment, ordinances, arrests, curfews, revolving shelters. Those manage people, not causes. When we see homelessness as a system problem, responsibility shifts. The question becomes, what's wrong with the system? That leads to solutions like Housing First, prevention and fair wage policy. Housing First meets compassion with design. It stabilizes people and repairs the system itself. Where we place blame decides where the cycle repeats or finally ends. So Housing First taught us what works, stable housing with support. Systems thinking shows us how to make that stability last. It's not just about helping individuals, it's about designing structures that make stability predictable. Data turns that design into feedback, showing where things move, stall, or break. When we combine compassion, design, and data, we move from philosophy to precision. This is how empathy becomes an architecture. Building systems that make good work the default rather than the exception. Okay, so everything so far has been about seeing things differently, loops and flows that shape homelessness, but seeing isn't enough. We're going to be looking into systems doing, designing systems that put what we've learned into action now. We'll start by looking at how HUD measures performance nationally, then explore tools communities can use to build stronger, smarter systems. Think of this as the shift from ideas to architecture, where empathy becomes strategy. So, HUD system performance measures were the first real attempt to track homelessness as a system rather than separate programs. They measure 6 areas: time homeless, returns, first-time homelessness, exits to housing, income growth, and population trends. These metrics create a shared language and accountability, but they're snapshots. They show what happened, not why. They're useful for direction, but limited for diagnosis. Without context or feedback loops, we manage numbers, not systems. We need more than measurement, we need understanding. Then HUD came up with the LSA, Longitudinal Systems Analysis. It connected multiple years of person-level data to show how people move through homelessness. It's good, but it's more like an X-ray, but not necessarily a full body scan. And it gets a little into the weeds, and really it's hard to, they don't really give out data where you can see this stuff as it's easy for the community to work with, honestly. It's more for the federal government to use. HUD has produced a tool that nobody uses. Sorry. Nobody uses this, although if I worked for HUD, I almost would just want to learn it just to teach people, because it's called Stella. It takes everything further. P is for performance, M is for modeling. It lets communities do what ifs. It's kind of a messy, diagram, but it can be a good tool if you have someone that can help you use it. But it's really, again, just for kind of seeing, what if we increased emergency shelter? What if we decreased transitional housing? So it's a what if kind of scenario thing, not looking at the whole system necessarily. But when evaluating tools used to analyze or diagnose a system, it's important to know the best application for those tools and whether we need to expand on what they're showing us. For example, a single KPI, like how many people are homeless today, feels concrete, but it hides movement. It doesn't show how many entered or exited, how many will return, or how trends are changing. It's a still photo of a moving river. Now, let's unfreeze the frame. When we add inflow and outflow data, the system starts to breathe. The line rises and falls, people entering and leaving. When inflow exceeds outflow, homelessness grows. When outflow outpaces inflow, it shrinks. That rhythm reveals balance or imbalance. Once we can see that rhythm, we can act intentionally to change it. Data stops being a report card and becomes an instrument panel, something we steer with, not just measure. Here, flow becomes even more measurable. Each month, we track how many people enter versus how many leave. When inflow stays higher, again. we rise. When outflow rises, so we can see this actually happening. And it's great because you can see visually spikes, what's happening with the data. It's really cool. Now this is an example of a homeless system flow chart. It shows the situation that people were in when they entered the homelessness system, what project type they were enrolled in, and the exit destination that they left. The overall idea is to have lots of red on the left and very little red on the right. And conversely, a little green on the left, a lot of green on the right. And when we zoom in on this example community, something stands out. Most people enter from homelessness, but many are exit to other. That's not a real destination. It's missing data. Sometimes it means no exit interview. Sometimes staff didn't know. Sometimes it was entered optimistically. But when other grows this large, the numbers stop telling the truth. It hides real outcomes and inflates success. Good data isn't about blame, it's about learning what's real so we can fix what's not. This is a major city in the United States, top 10 I would assume from size, and it's terrible. There's someone I'm working with, and this is not good data, unfortunately. Now this slide takes the previous slide a step further. Each bar shows how many people move through the system, where they start and where they end up. You can see mostly, actually, did you want to show before? Yeah, that's the other one, yeah. And so we have this again, and we're showing this other. And this is just not a good way of showing your data. It's not something you want. Other is not a valid field that makes any sense for us to be able to have a useful conversation about. Now, this is what success looks like when systems align. I was really pleased to see this flow chart. This example is person-centered housing options. So this is actually really cool. People entering from homelessness on the left, look at that, that's a lot of red, and green expanding on the right, exits to permanent housing. The red nearly disappears. That means this system is doing exactly what it's designed to do, moving people from crisis to stability. It's proof the housing first works when implemented at scale and supported by alignment. Data isn't just measurement, it's storytelling for progress. All right, we have a few minutes, so let's see if I can do this without breaking anything. So we are going. Don't memorize my pen.
So when you first started today, you made the statement, stabilize first, housing first is stabilize first, and...
Well, the housing is stabilization.
Right. Well, it's something you said, it kind of stuck out to me, but I don't remember the second part of it.
Oh, you don't have this, what am I thinking? I won't do it. There we go. So you can actually follow along with me at the website, or you can mess with this tool yourself. It's really neat. Gaitherdying.com is my website, /demo. And this is 8 years worth of data, which is incredible. And you can go through this dashboard. And this is PCHO. And this, I'm just going to walk you through it briefly. You've got total households, adult households. If you hover, you'll get tooltips that'll deepen the information that you're trying to find. Color coding, so red tends to be bad, green tends to be good, blue tends to be neutral. Not always, there's like gender and race, the colors are just arbitrary. But in general, I try to make them, like children, I don't like seeing child households. I made that red because it just seems bad, But again, now we're seeing all these cool inflows and outflows, and like, we can hover here and see like, oh, what happened in November 2018? There was a lot of people active as opposed to like June of 2019, like what happened? But you can start seeing really cool stuff. The actual inflow outflow chart that I showed you before, this is actual inflow outflow. Maybe I want to hover over this. I can see 124 people left that month, only 5 entered. Wonder what happened. I mean, really interesting things that you can visually see to ask questions about as opposed to just randomly going through a spreadsheet. How many chronically homeless, children, veterans, demographics, age, gender, HUD has dictated that we will be using sex instead of gender, so that's something that will be coming as an update that happened as of October 1st. That's a direct now from the federal government, so just something to be aware of when you see sex instead of gender after I update this later. Here's that system flow, and this is real data, real row level data. It's a beautiful, it's called a Sankey chart, and it's gorgeous. Data quality over time. This is great. There was a big spike in data. Their data quality is incredible. I deal with organizations that have hundreds and thousands of data quality errors, so this is fantastic. But this is a tool that not only can the organization use, the individual projects can. So I built this like a web app, so you could click on the information icon and it'll explain the dashboard for you. This actually does ad hoc reporting. You don't need a license, you don't need to be access to their system. You can just come in here and let's just change these dates. We don't want to show all this date. We want to change it to 2019. Project types, maybe I don't want to see street outreach. Maybe I don't want to see, I could change these as much as I wanted to. Individual projects. Maybe I want to run a project level report. I can do that. Maybe I have populations I want to look at. Maybe I just want to look at women. You know, what are women doing in the system? And then I just go back to the front page of the dashboard. And this is thousands of rows of data, and it's doing this in real time. So it takes about 30 seconds sometimes for it to filter. But now, up in the top left-hand corner, I see my population filter of woman. And now we're only looking at women in the system now. And so it's a real kind of an investigative tool that you can use to find out populations. You know, you can do it by race, household type, ages. You know, if you want to find out a certain race, age group is what they're doing in the system, it's incredible. A simple data quality thing that I like to do is sometimes I'll just do veterans, and then I'll go back into the front here, and I'm hoping all the children disappear. That doesn't always happen. Sometimes you've got 3-year-old veterans in the shelter, and I tell them war is hell. don't send children off to that. So, okay, look at that. And now I will say also, for privacy protection, any numbers below 10, I will not display on the dashboard because it's possible to filter down to project and age and whatnot. So I didn't want people to identify an individual. So numbers under 10 will not be shown on the dashboard. Like up here, yeah, limited matching records. So that's a really good thing. So yeah, so this is, now I will say on this, and I have this in the explanation, the Sankey chart's extremely complicated, and as you filter down too far, the threads may disappear, but if you hover over the columns, they're also accurate. So we're still seeing that large amount of red of homelessness and the large amount of permanent supportive afterwards. So. All right, so this dashboard will be up if anybody wants to check it out as a demo. Like I said, it's on, I have the link there in the file. It's just gaither.com/demo, all lowercase. Oh, by the way, there's also a cool QR code. Anybody wants to get to the demo by the QR code. You know, everybody loves QR codes. So that's up there if anybody. I have no idea why there's a dinosaur in the middle of it. I'm happy with that, actually. That's like a feature, not a bug. So I'm going to go ahead and I leave a lot of slides that are even more detailed and even more into the weeds because I just like to provide, I'd rather provide you with more information than you'll ever need than not enough. So I'm going to go ahead and let you know these slides are in here and they go beyond what's in what we talked about, even more system flow stuff. Just some ideas just to kind of put some nuggets in your head. I'm actually still learning about this. MIT actually has an entire systems design program. It's an odd way of shifting your thinking. I've actually used it for my personal life, my work, and it really is kind of, it's a harder way of thinking, but it's a more productive way. So I would encourage you, if you get a chance, check these slides out. Like I said, I'll make sure to have them available. Grab a card. They'll be on my website as well. So I'm going to go ahead and pause right now is because we've come full circle, you know, from Bob and his pillar in the bathtub and all that stuff. We're now back here. So I just want to go ahead and pause and just ask if there are any questions. Yes.
One of the words you used, I didn't know what you meant by it. You called it friction when you were talking about homeless systems. I don't know what that is.
Well, I mean, friction could probably be described in a lot of ways, but anything that would like slow down the process, honestly. It might be the person shows up to a work interview and maybe they smell because they couldn't take a shower. That creates friction. Maybe, you know, one person didn't get on the list soon enough and that becomes friction. It's basically anything that slows down that output, that outflow. And, you know, imagine anything that is in that drain that causes any kind of clog or any kind of slow down in the material. So, I mean, it could be many, many things, honestly.
Thank you.
All right, well, like I said, the demo is up. Oh, yeah.
What are the data sets that go into the dashboard?
Oh, great question. So, most of my dashboards, especially the ones that use the ad hoc reporting, that's out of the Homeless Management Information System. Every community across the country uses an HMIS. It's traditionally used for collecting homeless data that then gets reported back out to the local level, the state level, but also federally. So when I worked for CSC, I would produce these federal reports that would go to HUD. They would then organize them into what's called the AHAR, the Annual Homelessness Assessment Report, and that went to Congress. So the data we put in here, that gets all, put together, aggregated, goes to Congress, and then that's how they see the work we're doing or are not doing. So that's why it's really important to collect good data. And like I said, that one major city I showed you, their data is not good, and I'm gonna be talking to them because that report's gonna go to Congress, and they're not gonna be able to provide a very good explanation for what they're doing, and yet their budget from HUD's like, I'm not gonna say the exact number, but it's definitely, I think it's over 20 million. So that's a big organization not doing good stuff with their data, which is kind of sad. And then what they don't realize, they think they're helping the people on the ground, but they don't realize that their bad data is going to impact federal policy, and then the other communities won't get dollars they need because the story's not being told correctly. And that's why narrative matters. Data is more than just a spreadsheet. It really is knowing how to interpret the data, understand the data, and then be able to use it to make decisions. Not just go, oh, hey, we had 50 people this year, or 500 people, or 5,000. Now we've got, you know, 5,015. But to understand, well, why is that? Why is it 15? Or what? You know, did you out of those 5,000 originally? How many did you actually house? How many are there actually new this year? You know, that kind of stuff. So, and even in housing, it's the same way. Yeah.
I just want to say, with the data, I think she touched on it, but basically, I know in some cases it's not accurate, right? So it's like the numbers should be amplified, you know, and it's not accurate because, like me running a shelter program, I get individuals and families, and I know PCHO does too. You would get an individual that been homeless their whole life, right? And they're not an HMIS,
Yeah, right.
you know, so, and their family, they never, that's like with the, excuse me, that's like with the picture you had up, you know, with the reasons we see people are homeless. And these, you know, presentations, they're good. Numbers are good because it creates awareness. Numbers basically help get funding,
Exactly.
right? So, you know, that side is needed, but we have to always remember that, you know, there's people that's not being seen. You know, there's people that feels like they can't be submitted with the census or don't know how to go get help and go to these shelters or whatever because they feel like you know, they can't. They might because they have a warrant or, you know, whatever the dynamics of their situation,
Right.
you know. So these numbers, and these are pretty significant numbers, they should be identified as this is an approximate number. It's amplified definitely, you know.
You know, you're absolutely right. And honestly, every community I work with, their use of the data is you it's a range. I would say PCH, honestly, you guys have some of the best data I've seen. It's really good. I've seen large communities that it's not great, and again, that goes back to that narrative. When I go out in the community where I live in Southwest Florida, and I hang out with a lot of different people. I do karaoke and have a lot of fun, and I talk to people, and it's almost always like, oh man, that person's homeless because of like what they did. It's always, what do they do to deserve to be homeless? And it's really, I think, part of what I want people to take away is that we need to shift that narrative. We need to really start and putting the finger where it belongs on the policymakers, on the people making these decisions in our community that raise things up or decrease things, and then affect the people that don't have a choice. Yeah.
So, pardon me, so PCHO has great data, but that's only one agency in the community
Correct.
that is providing these services. How do we get and not everyone reports to HMIS, so how do we get the information for the whole county? So
Well, honestly, I'd say there's several ways. I mean, talking to Nick and Chuck at PCHO, they're pretty decent with data, or at least have contacts, and I'm talking to them. You can talk to me. I mean, I'm probably not going to sell you any kind of product, but I'll give you advice on stuff or who to talk to. HUD provides things. Your COC is the coordinator, for the geographic area. HUD actually has technical assistance they'll provide. I mean, government shutdown and all, but there are lots of different ways. There's different, and honestly, there might already be reports out there that people could use that they just don't know they're there yet. But there's a lot of things that are produced and they just kind of sit there and nobody knows the tools exist. So sometimes it's just getting the information out and letting people know that what's available.
it's like collecting all of the data from the county to represent everyone in the community.
And sometimes
The shelters in Monroe County will report to HMIS.
Yeah, we have to run a report.
SOS does also, so like SOS and PCHO do a lot of the street outreach for the people who are not in shelter, and then then there's other people we don't have at all.
That's just,
And sometimes you'll have,
Who wasn't on anything for like 4 or 5 years, he was almost, didn't even have food stamps or health insurance, and because we're a grant-based program, we were able to get him like all enrolled and everything, there are people, like, he was never counted because he just never engaged in any services.
and like sometimes we'll have, like in my community, we'll have an organization that might take a data lead and might bring in a few organizations and pull their data to make a project where you can have like a county-wide dashboard or report. In my community, a lot of times our United Way does a lot of our data and a lot of community coordination, which is pretty cool. Here you might have some different organizations that might do something similar. It might be United Way or somebody else, I don't know. But just somebody that has like skin in the game, willing to put together a group or a joined report for the county. I mean, something like that, happens all the time.
Yeah, I just want to add, for the HMIS report for Monroe County, you have to have a data completeness.
Yeah, data completeness.
Yes, you have to have that report. So I have to run that report. I actually run it every month. But again, I know it's not accurate because I get clients that.
But you're doing a lot of the work. I mean, you're going through and trying to do the work. That's really important. I mean, trust me, there's some people that just, I've worked with organizations, they're just like, we're not touching it. And I'm like, well, just give me the data, I'll enter it for you. I know you don't have the capacity, like, it's just whatever it takes to get it in there. So I get that. You had a question?
I just want to be thoughtful and trauma-informed about data collection. I've noticed some organizations, right, the dollars flow from data and there's feedback back and forth, but I think a lot of clients are not interested in a 2-hour assessment, all their demographics. Some of it is a barrier to care, and I think what the collection point is also important. I worked for transitional housing, and like people would come in, they need a place to sleep. They don't need to go through a 2-hour assessment and a plan of care, and then before you know it, they want to leave anyway. You kind of lost them. So you have to be very mindful of when and where and how and what's really important. Like, is this just for someone's research project, or is it for actually to justify and improve outcomes? So it's just important to keep that in mind too.
Yeah, they call it survey exhaustion or survey, something along that line. Yeah, and so I would say 2 points on that. One, you never want to re-traumatize somebody by questions. So the human element, that's just something that should be evaluated, and assessments and questions should be approved by a committee within your community that has skin in the game, lived experience, to make sure that stuff doesn't happen. So the human element is very important. As far as, but the data is also extremely important too, when it's done right. And what I want to say about it is, what happens is, you just said a 2-hour intake. Now, so the human element, obviously the questions we ask is very important, but is that also a barrier? Is that an obstacle? Is that a reason? Emergency rooms, they look at throughput in emergency rooms. And part of the thing is, how long does a patient wait? How long before they show up in the ER, before their data's in the system? And that's a measurement point. And when that measurement point's really long, people leave the ER and they don't make money off those people. And the ER wants people to stay. So, and they want people to, so it's the same way. If you've got a 2-hour process, that might be a problem. That might be a friction point. And we might need to bring that, maybe that could be a 15-minute assessment, or because the problem is, sometimes people want to know every question under the sun. How many bikes do they have? How many backpacks? Have they ever had a school lunch? I mean, but really, data fatigue is a thing, and survey fatigue is a thing. So paring that down into a short, what is actually needed to get someone in housing or services, assessment, then that's part of systems thinking.
Can you break it up too? Can you break it up into
Absolutely.
several smaller interviews?
Right.
What's the bare minimum I need to get you housed? And then,
Well,
over the course of time, is there another survey point? And I know it's also a barrier to applying. Like SNAP in California, there was like 240 questions to get SNAP.
Yeah.
Like that's a lot. That's a lot. So they cut it down to 50, which is still a lot, but it's like, they looked at it, so it's just an interesting.
Well, and sometimes, believe it or not, it can be a business process problem. At my old CSC, we would have a release of information, and we had to have a release of information for every client. If a family had 9 people, we had to have 9 pieces of paper, all signed separately for each individual. That's, I don't like using the word stupid, but it's inefficient. You could put it onto one piece of paper, and it saves 9 times the amount of time, because you're only doing one piece of paper. You saw the lines per person. Then you have one family member, the head of household is the one, so by doing that one thing, we dropped it by like 15, 20, 30 minutes. I mean, something crazy. So sometimes,
why can't we digitally redact things that we don't want to share with other agencies? Like, why can't we do a digital consent that lists it, and then when we need to forward it, we like redact everything?
yeah, there's, possibilities.
You know what I mean? I'm
But
just
those
like,
are
why is that?
processes that need to be
One more
examined.
consent saying we're allowed to redact, and let's keep it moving,
Yeah, so the systems level thing, and that's where committees and talking about where the pressure points. But sometimes it's also, you gotta be careful, because you can have something where it's very important, like we want to make sure, I don't know, we ask this very sensitive question on this one thing, and we're gonna have a committee to talk about it. It's gonna take 6 weeks and blah blah blah. And at the same time, there's like a major thing, like they don't have a street outreach team at all. So like they're worried about like one little tiny thing, but they're not even identifying new people in the community. It's like, well, you might want to, like, you're missing street outreach completely from the equation. So sometimes it's you choose your battles with capacity. But really, I would say, but without measurement, it's all opinion. Oh, I think we need to do this. We need to protect their PII. We need to do a lot of things. But why? Why do we need? Because you feel it? It's touchy-feely? Your heart's warm? Or because you've got some data that goes, oh my gosh, this person spent 6 hours filling out forms, and then they left because they still had 2 more forms. Like, that's a very specific amount of time and a specific situation that could be, I think, prepared. Yeah, in the back.
I'm just wondering if you have any advice, and I know it's like a timely kind of complicated, but we've had ICE come to our shelter before, and because of that, I have not been asking people questions about the immigration. I don't really need to for my funders, so I'm not asking. I get you want that data to help understand and move policy, but at this point I'm trying to in this time protect them. So do you have any advice? Because I really don't know right now who is there, and that isn't affecting the law enforcement. So I don't know.
So my first response will be legal. You know, just whatever protection of legally. But be responsible and be, you know, if you don't want to give up data, you don't have to. I mean, you know, necessarily. I mean, it's like, you don't, without a fight, I don't just hand over data. You know, there's gotta be data sharing agreements, and questions. I mean, honestly, find out where the question's coming from. You know, and you may not have to answer it. You know, I mean, and honestly, get a lawyer. I hate to say that, but I can tell you right now, a lot of organizations are getting lawyers because we're seeing a lot of requests for information that are shady or gray. We're not sure. So
I'm also intrigued by like AI, because it would be really nice to be able to do more client work and have an AI synthesize the interview into a billable note for me. But there's a dark side because AI is going to absorb our already existing biases. And there's like structured, I mean, we're already like by virtue of like, we're like screen level decision making, right? Ask this question first, ask this question next. And sometimes that can be really good. It can also be really, really bad, you know what I mean? So
you'll probably see AI within your software sooner than later. So you won't necessarily have to do it yourself. You'll see it implemented in a way where they keep it in a locked system. Because right now, you don't want to just be feeding data AI and having it go out, but you can build internal systems, and the AI will only, so the bias, it's not going to be able to get biases off the internet necessarily. It's only trained on your data. And you'll see some of those rolled out in your systems, and they'll be somewhat more reliable. I'm not blanket saying any system's going to be perfect, but it's better than just having it out there in the ether. And feel free to, I do a lot of work with AI, so if anybody wants to talk about AI after this, it's a whole other thing I do just because I think it's a good way to speed up simple processes. You know, if you need to do a press release or something, don't put people's information in there, that's bad. You know, data privacy is important, but if you need to write a newsletter, use AI, and I can talk to you about that. But I want to respect everyone's time, and I just want to say thank you.
Thank you.
My information is